Hello and welcome to what has now become part 4 of the advanced tracking tutorial for the radar builders. Now, where we left off last time is, well, doing some more tracking system setups for the 2D and 3D radar. What we'll be looking at now is how to use the prefab blips and a little bit about using the mesh blips. And we'll further set up our compasses by using our rotation target system, which comes with both the 2D radar and the 3D radar, and you can find them here in the designs tab. You'll find rotation targets. But first I'm going to start with the 3D radar, then move to the 2D radar, and we'll show you the prefab blips. Alright, so starting with the 3D radar, I'm going to want to go to my blips. I'm going to find my enemy prefab fold out here. And I'm going to want to find a blip, find the prefab. So if you use the 3D radar builder or the Pro Radar builder, then you'll have these prefabs. We're going to use the small blue star prefab here. Let's just assign it. And there's one more thing that we need to do. Let's go down here to create blip as, and just select prefab. And we can just go ahead and run the scene. Now, one more thing that we did was that for our main camera, we actually turned off the flare layer on the main camera, and that's because our render camera needs to render this particular prefab blip, so it needed a flare layer. But if we have both flare layers on at the same time, then this will be the result. So we turn off the flare layer on the main camera, or we could just, okay, let me see here. So yeah, we have to turn off the flare layer on the main camera. So let's do the same thing with the 2D radar. Let's go ahead into the prefab fold out under enemies here, and let's find it a blip. Now, if we're using the Pro Radar builder or the 2D radar builder, then you'll have the blip that I'm about to show you, which is this blip B here. So we're going to go ahead and drag this in, and then we're just going to scroll down here again and switch to prefab, and we're going to run the scene. Now what you'll notice is that now we have in our 2D radar our prefab blips moving around quite nicely. And you'll notice that we have some protruding from the edges, and these are using a particle system, if I remember correctly. But what we could do here for the protruding sprites is use mask and masking. And I'll show you an example scene a little bit later that actually uses those. And here in our 3D radar, we can see that our blips are, our prefab blips are rendering quite nicely. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at that in the scene. So there we go. All right, now there's one more thing to show you, and it's the compass setup. So if I was to go ahead and run the scene again, I'm going to quickly switch back to using a sprite on both of them, both the 2D and 3D. I'll just quickly switch back to using a sprite. I'm gonna use a sprite instead. Okay, there we go. Just gonna run the scene here, and then we're gonna set up the compass systems. Again, we're gonna do all of this without having to write code. So if we were to go ahead and grab our main camera, let's say our main camera is going to be following our player, right? Or the main camera is going to be it's inside the head of our player or something. It's going to be a first person view, and our main camera is going to have to rotate around the y-axis. Now what happens here is that the compass seems to be moving correctly, but if we rotate through, say, the x-axis, you'll notice that the radar itself is now in the wrong position. So we're going to have to use a rotation target to correct that. And once we use a rotation target to correct the radar's rotation, then the compass rotation is going to be off, and we'll use another rotation target to correct that. It may sound a little complicated, but I'll show you it's going to be quite simple, and I'll show you that right now. Starting with the 3D radar. Now I'll select the 3D radar, and then I'm going to go over to designs, and then I'm going to go to rotation targets, and I'm going to increase this value to 2. Now for the first rotation target, we want to correct the rotation of the radar so that it maintains its position regardless of the rotation of the main camera. So we're going to drag in the 3D radar here so that it now reads rotate this object 3D radar proportional to this object, and it says none. So now we need to assign a game object. We can either use the main camera or the render camera. The render camera being a safer option, as you may destroy your main camera for whatever reason. So we just assign the render camera, since the render camera's rotation will always be equal to the main camera's rotation. So it now reads rotate this object 3D radar proportional to this object render camera. In the next folder, what we're going to want to do is rotate the compass, and we'll do this one at runtime. So I'll go ahead and run the scene here. And first, we're going to make sure that our first rotation target, where we rotate the 3D radar, is actually correct. So let's begin rotating the main camera again. So we grab the main camera, and we move to the y-axis, and now we move to the x-axis, and we can see that that radar is holding its position as it should. However, you can notice that the compass, even though we're looking up, is now saying that north is also up, which is incorrect. Let's go ahead and fix that. So let's go down to our second rotation target here, and let's open up the 3D radar and let's find our compass. So again, under 3D radar, designs, let's find the sprite that has our compass on it. And let's just rename this compass. Now let's drag it in here. So now it says rotate this object compass proportional to this object. And we can either assign the 3D radar or the player. We're going to assign the player to it. If we assign the 3D radar, we're going to have to freeze the X, Y, and Z rotations. Again, it may be safer to just assign the 3D radar to it, because we may destroy this player. But I'll show you with the player first, and then we'll switch to using the 3D radar as the target feeding the rotation into the compass. Alright, so now we have our compass here not doing what it should because we forgot to set this to 90 degrees. Okay, there we go. So it's added a rotation here. It's usually set to 90 degrees for sprites. Alright, so that fixes that. And now we can rotate our main camera and not worry about the compass not pointing in the right direction. Oh, let's grab the main camera and rotate that. If you can grab. So there we go. And the compass is always pointing in the right direction. Alright, now if you were to switch to using the 3D radar, we would then need to freeze the X, the Y, and the Z axis. So let's exit play mode and let's do that. And there we are. We've correctly set up the rotation targets and corrected the rotation of the 3D radar and the compass. Now let's do this for the 2D radar. We need to firstly just set up the compass, and then we will make the center object rotate with the player. Now let's increase this one to 2 also. And we can do this at runtime. So let's do it at runtime here. So we're going to start with the compass. So I'm going to grab this and we're going to find that compass. which should be this one. It says rotate compass proportional to, and let's grab our player here. Let's test this rotation. Let's grab the player and let's rotate through the y-axis. Okay, let's just use that y-axis. If I can click. Okay, there we go. Now we can rotate the player and we can see the compass moving. Let's set the rotation back to 0 again. So we have the correct north rotation. Let's move through positive. So this means that we need to flip it to inverse. Oops, should be set to proportional. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to do the other one outside of play mode. So we're just going to do these settings again. So we're going to rotate the 2D radar. I'll leave that on proportional, and we're going to say player. And we're going to need to use the player's y-axis, and quickly the 3D radar, since we only changed this value at runtime, we're going to have to just set this back to 90 degrees. And let's go back to the 2D radar. Alright, now there's one more thing that we want to do here. We want our center object for our 2D radar to also rotate while our player rotates. Or maybe not. Let's test it and see if we want that. Oh, wait, there's an issue. Whoops, accidentally dragged in the wrong thing, so it's rotate. Let's just rename this to compass. Okay, there we go. And let's run the scene here. Actually, let's do this thing first. Let's go and open this up and say rotate instance blip, and let's write in player. And quick to note, if you already have an object here and you're using instance blip, then you need to make sure that this is empty, also it will fall back to using this instead. So when you use instance blip, what it does, it searches your blips for the particular blip you want to use, and it will fetch that blip and use it. So we'll rotate the player blip to center blip proportional to this object, and we're just gonna grab the player and drag the player in, and let's use its Y rotation. Alright, now let's rotate our player to the y-axis and see what happens in the 2D radar. So now we're looking right, which means north is over the left side. And we can see that our player is still pointing facing north, which we don't want. And even if we set this to inverse, it wouldn't make sense. So we're going to not want to use this. So we're going to just remove this and just use one rotation target instead. So now you know that you can also fetch instance blips and use them. However, if your blips that have the same name, it'll be most likely use the first one that it finds. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now are some other example scenes. The first scene that I'll show you is a environment resimulation, which I said that I'd show you earlier. So I'm going to go into this scene called 3D radars. I'm going to save this. And I'll be showing you two things here. A screen space simulation, well, a screen space 3D radar, which is using other radars as blips, and an environment resimulation of planet and asteroids. So what you're looking at right now in front of you is a 3D screen space radar, which is using actual 3D radars as blips inside itself. Now, this came about from trying to actually break the 3D radar during testing when it wouldn't break. So this just stuck as an example radar in the project. So you can find this in your 3D radar builder or Pro Radar builder. Now scrolling over to our environment resimulation here, we see that we have this planet and some asteroids whizzing around it. In our scene somewhere, there's an actual game object named planet with some asteroids moving around it. And all we did to do a environment resimulation of what's happening in that part of the scene is to say that the planet object is going to be the center object here, and the asteroids, which are represented as blips in the radar also, can be rendered inside of the 3D radar, and it just resimulates that environment inside this local space. All right, let's take a look at a different scene. This is a first-person screen space 3D radar using minimaps. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this. Actually, I'm just going to select the 3D radar here, and let's turn on minimap. Let's look at the minimap settings, and we already have our settings for that minimap. I'm just going to go ahead and run the scene. And here we go. So we can see that now our 3D radar is rendering out a minimap. It's masking the outside of the map, and our character, we have this radar moving nicely with our character's motion. The compass looks flipped. We can just fix that. Actually, let's flip that compass again right now. Let's go into the settings for this particular radar. And we're going to want to uncheck the freeze since we're using the character. Actually, it doesn't matter. We just go ahead and use this instead. All right. That should cover it. All right, let's see if there's any other scene that you need to see here. So there was one more scene to show you. It's the star map scene, and it's similar to the first scene I've shown you where we used the blue star prefab. So in this scene, we're creating something that looks like small galaxies using the 3D radar builders. So I'm going to run the scene and then we'll take a look at those. And you have this scene in your 3D radar builder or Pro Radar builder. So now we have the stars moving around and we have that sun in the center. And one really cool thing that you can do with the 2D and 3D radars is that you can pan and zoom. So this could very well be a galaxy in our game, and we're just resimulating that entire environment inside of our 3D radar. But what if you wanted to kind of just drag everything over and look at a different planet and zoom down on it? We could actually do something. We could do that using the pan and zoom functions. And the scripts are included, so you can actually look at how we tap into the radar to pan and zoom. So we just hit this pan button here, and we're now just panning over to the left, and we can look at more stars. Or we can move up and down through the world, just like that. Right, and that will cover this video. In the next video, we'll be looking at minimaps, mask, and masking. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.